Starting and going. All right, we're live here. All
Live.
right. So, hello, everyone. Anyone who might be watching or anyone who's watching the archived version of this. So I'm Ian. Thanks for your interest in what we believe is a really important topic. Just quickly want to jump into it. My name's Ian Nugent. I live right now in Maryland. My connection to Florida. I was born and raised in Florida. And I also have a lot of family that's still there, a lot of friends that are still there. Concerned about the situation in the country, and particularly believe Florida is really important to helping to resolve some issues, particularly for the Black community. Just want everyone else, if you can give not only your name, but you can give also, if you care to, you don't have to, your political bent or leaning. I'm registered as an independent, have been registered as an independent since I began voting. And I have, in the presidential campaigns that I've voted in, I've always voted for Democrats. Local elections, I've actually voted for Republicans on occasion. But for this election, particularly, I believe that there's no escaping, and I think Democrats are the only option for the things that need to happen today. So that's me. Who wants to go next? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
I pick Shireen.
Wow, thanks. Okay. My name is Shireen Saunders. I grew up in Florida, moved away. Now I've been living here for the past maybe 6 years again. Yeah, I would definitely call myself a Democrat. Definitely been learning some more about the progressive viewpoints, and I've been leaning toward that as well. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Shireen, who wants to go next? Who's next? Who's next?
I guess I'll go. My name is Jonathan Grant. I see political affiliation. I'll probably consider myself more of a Black nationalist. But in terms of the our I guess our current political system and the bipartisan that we're all kind of forced into, I guess I have to play the Democratic role in that regard. But almost kind of in the reverse of Brother Ian, I may play the Democratic role, but then I'll kind of lean sometimes independent, depending on who's running. I've also been known to vote Green Party as well, so I tend to lean a little more left, even more so than the Democrats can traditionally be. So
Okay, appreciate that, man. Thanks.
I guess I'll go next.
Oh yeah, ladies first. Well,
Okay. Yeah, I was also born and raised in Florida. My name is Sierra. I'm currently a resident of Tallahassee. I'm also currently registered as a Democrat, and I typically tend to vote down the ballot all Democrats. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
now we haven't been given the qualifications of everybody in here, like what they do, because Dr. Grant is actually Dr. Grant, and he didn't mention that. So because these are things
we're not even.
Wait, hold on, stop. Wait, this is my turn. Excuse me. I just want people to know that they're not wasting their time. That we have some really interesting people on here. So, John, do you want to tell us exactly what is you do? Like, what is it? What is it? Why is it important to have you on here, or why is it worth having you on here?
Yeah, why do we pay the big bucks to get you on here?
No.
Nah, actually, because I was sleep right now, so that's really what I do. I sleep and eat. I really just am extremely interested in this topic. And of course, I didn't know we were talking about where we were from Florida, but I'm originally from Jacksonville, so I was born and raised Duval County. You know what it is. 904 North Side, Lake Forest all day. So yeah, that's why I was born and raised. A lot of my family are still there, and so I definitely still have interest in the political climate of Florida. And so soon as me and Steve, we always have great conversations in terms of politics, and we'll go back and forth and debate. And sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, but we always end up leaving the conversation knowing more than when we came in. It's just excited about him inviting me on this kind of panel to discuss, discuss something that is very important to all of us. So I appreciate y'all having me here.
Great.
Yeah, and reclaiming my time here. He's actually he just finished his doctorate in sociology, where he elaborated and studied some of these issues. So reclaiming my time.
So tell us more about you. Tell us more about you.
And I think it's worthwhile mentioning Sierra too, because Sierra is actually, from what I understand from Ian, are you in school right now, Sierra?
I am currently a student at the Florida State University.
Okay, the Florida State University. Now, I think that's really important because our discussion today is going to deal with youth, people like Sierra. So I think you're one of the most important panelists that we have on here tonight. So I'm going to talk about myself. I'm Steven. I grew up for the most part in Florida. I didn't spend all my time. I wasn't born in Florida, but I was raised in a very critical point in my life in Florida. So spent some time in grade school and in high school. So I kind of consider myself a Floridian. I currently live in Atlanta. That's how I get to talk to, I'm privileged to talk to people like Grant and other cool people. But yeah, I think I've also been, I also consider myself an independent. I kind of have a similar history to Ian in that I must say, at least right now, that I regret that I have voted for some Republicans, just, mostly Democrat, but I have voted for some Republicans. And I regret that because some of those people have turned out to be really awful Trump sycophants. So that's me. But I hope I'm here for this conversation, supporting Democrats in the midterm and likely in 2020 down the ballot.
I appreciate everyone. So to focus us, we're the topic of the group that you all are hope a part of and going to be active in is Black and concerned about Florida in the midterms. Black and concerned about Florida in the midterms. So that's really the topic, the primary topic that we're looking at. And looking at the midterms, I believe, and Stephen and I are the ones who started the group. We both believe that these midterms are consequential, just period, for the country, for the world. And of course, those are things worth looking at. Those are topics worth discussing, and a lot of people are discussing that. But primarily for this discussion and for this group, we're looking at the impacts of these midterm elections this year, November 2018, on the Black community and the Black community at large, but particularly the impact that the Florida vote can have on these midterms, which by extension then will affect the Black community in America at large. Just for some little more context, I want to read what we wrote for our description for this group, just again to give a little more context and remind everyone what we're focusing on here tonight. The description is: in every branch of government. Sorry, this is wrong. That's not the description. That's the action plan. Let me find the description here. You have been added to this group because we believe your effort can substantially impact the well-being of our families and of all country for a generation and beyond. In 2000, just 537 voters in Florida, that's less than the population of Stephen and I, the high school we went to, private high school that we went to, just 537 voters in Florida were able to determine the course of our country in the presidential election. In 2018, this swing state will be pivotal in determining law enforcement attitudes towards Blacks, sentencing policies which disproportionately affect Blacks. It will also affect voting districts. It will affect which, and those voting districts often have been used to have been manipulated to suppress the Black voice in the political process. And also, this could possibly make up the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, historically, every advance or even the setbacks that we've had for Blacks in this country have been tied to a Supreme Court decision from slavery time until the recent rollback of some of the voter rights, voting rights acts provisions that we've seen. So the changing the course of Black history is what we believe is within the reach of the members of this group. And so again, we're looking at really trying to impact the country, but primarily here through Florida, why we believe that this is important. So what we want to hear and just go over from us individually, collectively, what are some of the things for you? Why do you think these midterms are so important? Or maybe we're off course. Maybe you even think they're not as important. But we really are hoping that the people who are watching now or the people who will watch this recording as a result of this will have more context, more understanding, just like Jonathan mentioned earlier. When we have these kind of discussions, all of us come away learning more, thinking more clearly, seeing things from different perspectives, and hopefully more energized in our efforts, more focused in our efforts to affect the course of this nation. So just want to hear anyone who wants to jump in there. I've already put some things kind of on the table. I'll review the things that we identified where this election will impact. First, law enforcement attitudes towards Blacks. And of course, we know the impact that law enforcement has already had, but particularly, and maybe I'll just kind of expound on that just a little bit. Jeff Sessions is likely to be replaced, and the Senate has to confirm his replacement. And if there's a little more pressure on that Senate when they're choosing his replacement, that can heavily impact criminal justice policies going forward. It's without doubt, Jeff Sessions has significantly changed the direction of law enforcement policies towards criminals, going more towards a hard line from the older policies from the war on drugs. And that whoever is in that seat, and not even if Jeff Sessions remains, but the makeup of Congress, which Florida can significantly impact, will be determined and will have an impact also on law enforcement policies. I don't know if you guys want to just start with that, I should say. Maybe if anyone wants to even share some of their thoughts on law enforcement policy and particularly how this election can impact that.
I don't know, just going back to what you said about like why this is so important. Well, for one, in 2016, I think most people, Black folk in particular, completely just like lost faith and lost all hope in just the political process of this country. And so I feel like now in 2018, we have a chance to do this over, not just even in Florida, but in Georgia. I mean, we have a Black woman, Stacey Abrams, up for governor, and even in Maryland, where you're at, what the dude name is, Ben Jealous, yeah, he's up on the ballot as well. So if anything, what this should tell Black folk now for these midterm elections, that like, listen, we dropped the ball in 2016, no matter who you voted for. If you voted for Hillary or Trump, we all dropped the ball in 2016. And at this point, we have a second chance to at least make some of that right. And I think with that should be enough push to all get us out here to organize, rally, and do what we need to do come November.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so really just kind of trying to get back in the swing of it from the momentum we lost in 2016. That's good. Yeah. Anyone else wanna hit that point?
Yeah, I definitely think that policies, particularly as it relates to criminal justice, policies such as stand your ground, right? I think definitely have to be addressed. And I do feel like having Andrew Gillum in that governor's seat, I'm not really sure exactly how state politics works in terms of pushing a policy like that through, and exactly how much power Andrew Gillum would have as governor over possibly repealing it. But I would just imagine that there's a lot of influence that he can push, and then depending on who he appoints to his cabinet or to his team, can definitely make an impact on that state legislature. Because I mean, a lot of politics, of course, is deals. So part of the deal, right? Because one of the reasons why we want Andrew Gillum in office, and I think he's actually said that as part of, when I was watching one of his interviews, as part of his campaign promise, is to work on repealing the Stand Your Ground law. And so I think that that alone would be a huge victory for him, especially since, I don't know if you all saw the RIP Trayvon 6-part series, I think BET aired or whatever, but they just kind of did a history of that law and show how race, housing, gentrification, all of these things were all tied into how that law even kind of came about in the first place.
Let me interrupt you quickly. Say the name of that that documentary, or what? Or say it again, so make sure we can look it up if people need to.
I think it was called RIP Trayvon.
Okay, you remember what network that was done by, or where people could probably get that?
BET, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. All right, yeah, go ahead. Just in case someone wanted to look that up. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that would be a huge victory for him, and of course, with that being the kind of culprit, from a policy standpoint, that has kind of kicked off this whole Black Lives Matter movement with the murder of Trayvon Martin. So I do think that would be a kind of a culminating point, or at least one of them, to this whole kind of journey that we've been on for the past, 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
So I think that for me, that's one of the reasons, or that was one of the things I thought about when Steve first hit me up, in terms of kind of pulling a political group together that are invested in Florida and Florida politics. So
yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of that, I think Stand Your Ground law is a law that affects primarily Floridians. So when you're in there, that affects you. And I think that in general, we're affected a lot by many of these local policies, that are passed in the states. So we definitely need to reclaim many of those, state positions. But I think another thing that's kind of unique about Florida is the fact that, Florida's been so pivotal in so many different respects, right? Like, it was, as we had read in the introduction, it was pivotal in picking George Bush because we all know the controversy that happened there in 2000. This time around, what we got going on in Florida ballot is that initiative for felon, allowing ex-felons to be able to vote, and that will restore some accountability to to the state of Florida, just locally as well, but also nationally. Like when we're picking the president, and Florida has a ton of electoral votes at stake. When we get our people who have been locked up disproportionately or brought into the criminal justice system disproportionately and allow them to be able to have a voice, when Florida is most of the time close and it can come down to hundreds or a few thousand votes, Florida having that felon enfranchisement is going to allow us to put us over the top, or make it a lot easier for us to get over the top in the presidential elections. So I think that's important. I think that's another item there of why Florida is not just important just for Florida, but for Black people everywhere.
Right, and also to piggyback off of what you said, I'm just glad that that future Governor Andrew Gillum has been so vocal about repealing or revising the Stand Your Ground law, because let's be honest, that law works for no one who is of a certain hue. Let's just be honest. That law, it was put in place to only benefit certain people. And that's just what it is. And so to be able to elect someone to that position who represents the future of the state, the future of all the voters in the state, we need someone to be there to basically vouch for us, to basically speak on our behalf, because once again, like this law, like I said earlier, this law is not benefiting anyone. And if we want to go as far as that, like this law is basically immoral, because like I said, like who is it benefiting? If we really look at it, who is it benefiting and who is it hurting the most? So that definitely, we need to do away with that ASAP.
Quickly, Stephen, you were mentioning a ballot initiative. Just again, for those who are watching might not be familiar with it, whether now or later, you want to expound on that ballot initiative that you're referring to?
Yeah, essentially in Florida, if you have a felony at any point in time, on your record, your right to vote has been stripped from you. So you are not allowed to participate in any elections. And
federal, anything?
That's my understanding.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
It's that you can't do anything, and I think there's 1.5 million people, if I understand it correctly, 1.5 million people stuck in this limbo, but but I think the law that they're signing in will bring in just under 1 million of those people, and make them eligible to vote once again.
Except if you've been convicted of murder. I think it's like something else. It's
there are certain categories that it wouldn't.
Right. Yeah. So it's 1.5 million in all, but the ballot initiative will, like you said, excluding those people, will give just under, very close to 1 million people their voice back.
And also to be clear too, currently in Florida, a felon can petition for their rights back, but that. Of course, you got to pay court fees. You have to go to a court and get that done. So, particularly within our community, that's not often either known or done. But this law this ballot initiative would change that and make it a lot easier for felons to get back in the political process. All right, so let's move on. I do want to highlight something that I heard Stephen trying to bring out. We have here, I think this is actually a really good example of what Stephen and I are looking at when we're looking at this issue. We have Stand Your Ground, which highlights a Florida concern. Stand Your Ground is not going to affect me. I live in Maryland, right? As long as I'm in Maryland. If I visit in Florida, it might affect me. But as long as I'm not in Florida, Stand Your Ground doesn't affect me so much. And so, but that is still something that's important. That's something that is one of the concerns that are motivating people when you're going to the ballot, choosing between Gillum and the alternatives. But also, as Stephen's trying to point out, and that's really what kind of touches us, is that beyond Florida, there are many implications of this election because Florida is a swing state. And I just want to make sure just that everyone understands how this works. I live in Maryland. It's a blue state in terms of our federal representation. We have a Republican governor. We've had Republican governors for a few terms in the past as well. But when it comes to me making a vote and me pushing my people here in Maryland to vote, when it comes to determining the makeup of the House of Representatives, when it comes to makeup of the Senate, I have little to no say. Whether I vote or not, most likely Democrats are going to get in there. But Florida is one of the most hotly contested swing states, particularly when it comes to federal politics. And so that's really for us why investing in Florida for the local concerns, but also for the national concerns that Florida can strongly influence. Right now, you guys make sure I'm right. Rubio is a Republican, and what's the guy's name? Is the Democratic senator in Florida?
Bill Nelson.
Bill Nelson.
So you have a Republican and you have a Democrat, and right now the Democrat is being contested by, unfortunately, a popular governor that is running against that Democratic senator. And that seat is conceivably within the reach of Republicans, which could alter the makeup of the Senate. And that doesn't just affect Stand Your Ground. That doesn't just affect local Florida politics. That affects me because that senator will be confirming my Supreme Court justices. That senator will confirm the next Attorney General. That senator will be deciding what laws are in and what are out. So that's, again, just so what we looked at so far. I just want to just where we've looked at. Sierra brought up that good point about trying to get back into it, getting the Black voice back in politics from what we lost in 2016. We looked at the stand your ground law and its local consequences of this election. We're also looking at the national consequences of this election. If I can, I'll move to one of the other points that we had in there, unless anyone else wanted to make any more comments on that.
No, good.
Good. Okay. All right. So the next point that we looked at in the description was voting districts. Voting districts. This election, we believe, will have a significant impact on voting districts, and that's national voting districts. That's the design of the maps of the districts. Anyone want to comment to that? What their familiarity is with that, or why you think that's important or not?
Why voting districts are important?
Right.
Oh, okay.
I'll go ahead and jump in and just talk about that briefly. The importance of voting districts is essentially voting districts determine, the makeup of your representatives, both in the federal and the local, right? So every place in America is divided up into districts, and there's a representative for every district. And when you set those districts up, what people can do is through gerrymandering is that they can say, okay, we're going to reduce the impact that a certain community has, rather than just distributing that community proportionally. We can set it up so that they're all packed into one area and they get one representative, whereas we divide the other areas up and give more representatives to a different group. And so what this does is this gives outsized voice to, particularly when they're doing this, like Republicans are doing this, they're giving it to their white constituents, a lot of times non-college educated whites. And so all the time you turn on the news, who is it that the people in the news are always talking about? Well, what is it that Trump country is talking about? What is the middle America talking about? Well, that's because those people have disproportionately more representation in the federal government than Black people do, right? Even though they're not really more than the liberal coalition. So we need to be able to flip that script so that, we have this, that our voice carries a fair amount of weight, the weight that it's supposed to carry. And that's what, these voting districts, which Congress controls, which are local government controls, which are governor controls, that's what these voting districts are going to determine how important your voice is. So when your voice is important, what the politicians have to do is they have to come up with a message which pleases you. They have to come up with a message which says, okay, this is for your best interest. When you're not, when your voice is not that important, then they're just saying, okay, we don't have to think about you. We're going to go to, our base. And then that's how we end up with these strident voices, like your governor that's running for, like the guy who's running for governor in both Florida and Donald Trump. So I think that kind of covers why those voting districts are so important.
But I actually have a question about voting districts, because I think, and I actually don't know a whole lot about them, but from what I understand, voting districts separated along some geographical boundaries, right? That's connected to housing, which we know is connected to race. But you also have, within certain political interest groups, you have super PACs, right? And with these super PACs, they're able to come up with an agenda that allows them to say, and I think me and Steve have talked about this, having this agenda that allows them to put money or say, listen, we can promise you X amount of votes or whatever if you push this particular agenda. And that seems to function outside of just voting districts or people knowing, all right, these people are in my district. These are the people that I need to organize with in order to push a certain political message. And so are these electors loyal to the districts, or are they more so loyal to the PACs or to these political interest groups that are actually giving them money or giving them votes or giving them a position or giving them a platform for them to be heard? So I guess that's just kind of my question.
If I can jump in on that one, I mean, I think the goal, I think if for us to be fair, our goal should not be for us to control America so that it's catered for, even to pick on what you said earlier. I don't think it's fair for us to push for Black nationalism, to say that we want to now make America serve Black interests disproportionately. And I think for me, my concern is right now, at least, at the very least, and Steve and I talked about this, I feel that right now we're on the defense. We're not, it's not that we're on the offense trying to take something from somebody, or that we're trying to right now, we're just not able to get what is fair. And if I can maybe share this thing, see if I can share my screen. And I'll use this because I can pick on Democrats for this. Is everyone seeing my screen?
Yes.
So this is a map of Maryland's voting districts. And again, I show this. This is the result of Democratic gerrymandering. You can see, can you see my mouse too?
No.
No.
Okay. Well, at least you can see the green, right?
Mm-hmm.
See the green?
Yes.
All of that green is voting district 1, right?
Oh.
Now, Jonathan mentioned the thing before about geography. If you look in that southeast corner, Pocomoke City or whatever that is, and then you go all the way up to that northwest corner of that green, you're talking about a 2 to 3 hour drive. That's not geography, right? What Democrats did, like I mentioned, Democrats largely control Maryland. They packed in the most of the Republican constituencies into one district. And so as a result, that is the only Republican district in Maryland. Of the 8 districts in Maryland, there's just one that is Republican, because they got all the people who are Republican leaning in one district. And you see all within there, all of those overlapping colors and all those things. That's obviously gerrymandered. They configured it so that they could keep just enough Republicans in this district so they wouldn't be able to have a voice. This is not fair, right? And this is not fair, in my opinion, on the other side. This is Democrats who did this. What I'm saying is we don't want this. We're not, if the fair person does not say we want to have it gerrymandered so that we can get our way. But the reverse of this is being done all over this country by Republicans. And Republicans do it generally, not just based on politics, but they do it based on color, by minorities. They do pack minorities into a district so that their voice is muted. And that's really the kind of in my mind, the big point of this, that it's the local governments that actually set those districts. So the Maryland legislature, the Maryland governors, they're the ones who oversee voting districts within the state. And so similarly in Florida and throughout the country, Republicans have been able to mute the voices of Blacks by this gerrymandering process very significantly. And so this is a point, and like Jonathan mentioned, this was something I wasn't very familiar with not too long ago. But seeing this, this is where we're pushing for, in Florida and throughout the country, to at the very least push back on this Republican control so that we can we just want it to be fair. We're not, I don't think we want to push to mute anyone else's voice, but we at least want to have fair representation.
Yeah, I'll come back in on that. Because I know we're running out of time, and we're probably going to run to another topic. But I think that why this isn't so important is that I think a good example, a concrete example, is right now. There is widespread understanding that the war on drugs has disproportionately affected brown people, people of color, right? Especially our Black communities, decimated our communities. This is a known fact. Like this, it's just very widely, the statistics all bear this out, and it's nothing that's hidden. But you can't get any of the representatives. Like, for example, they have bipartisan agreement in the Senate, but you can't get anything out of the House because the representatives do not represent, it doesn't look like actual America. It looks like the representatives look disproportionately like middle America and white America. So our voices aren't equally heard, even though there's a lot of people who are, Black, white, who understand, hey, we need to change this. We can't change this because these politicians aren't beholden to our voice. But to Jonathan's point, what the PACs do is that the PACs are money, essentially. It's like people can bring a lot of money and do advertising. So they can really pound people that are soft. It's about controlling the narrative. But at the end of the day, they can't control the narrative of Black people because we live this all the time. Like we are the ones who have our relatives in jail and going in and out of the system. So we can't, if our voices are proportionately representative in the government, then we're going to be more likely to have the kind of policies which are going to push us ahead, move through Congress and move through the local governments because we are proportionally represented. And so I think that's the importance of it.
Mm-hmm. All right. He mentioned, I didn't even notice. We have just 15 minutes. I'm going to be true to our thing. We want to finish on time. Stop here. We also mentioned the Supreme Court, but what I want to do, I want to make sure we get an opportunity for everyone, if they care to share a little more personally. And personally, you may remember in the description, we put that this thing impacts our families. So for me, I grew up middle class. I'm currently middle class. My life is not the majority story of Black America. I live in a county, Prince George's County, that has 5 of the 10 wealthiest Black cities in the country. Right? That's not the reality for most of Black America. But I have many family members that do live the life of most Black America. And I have friends that I've grown up with. I have relatives I've grown up with that are living the life of most of Black America. Unfortunately, much of Black America, well, I'll say most of Black America, is not aware of these things that we've just mentioned, and is not aware of the impact that this little thing, voting, this simple, trivial thing, can actually have on their lives. And so for me personally, my kind of strongest motivating factor in this is trying to do it. And I'm sure most of you, I don't know, all of you saw Black Panther, and that concept there, that you have this idea of these Black people who have so much, and they were not, because of fear of loss for themselves or sacrifice for themselves, they weren't willing to do what they could to help, particularly other Blacks in this world. And as a result of that, there was centuries of suffering. And so what I feel is that for me, I have much. I have vibranium in comparison to what many of my relatives and friends have. And I mean, this is really not much of a sacrifice at all. But whatever I can do to try to motivate people to, hopefully by the end of tomorrow, voting registration in Florida ends tomorrow, to get people out there to vote, to register, and get people to the polls to vote. I think that I know, I understand very concretely the impact that can have. And so for me, that's really what's pushing me, what I think is why this thing is so important. Anyone else want to share, what things more personally are impacting them with this midterm elections?
I think we need to hear from Shireen. Shireen, you got to unmute it. Yeah, there we go.
So hilarious. Okay. Where to begin? I will say one thing that's interesting is just seeing the governor that's now running for office. I think it's for Senate, Congressman.
Yeah.
I was mixing them up. Yeah, it's so interesting seeing how things have happened in the state in the past few years as far as healthcare is concerned. That's my field, public health. So seeing how with the whole Medicaid expansion, everything, that was supposed to have come to Florida to help so many people as far as federal dollars, and how that was shut down and turned away. And even seeing how people that were coming to provide free aid were turned away from coming to set up at free community clinics and health departments. And it would seem as if, you know, the Medicaid expansion was a bad thing, the way that it was fought against so sincerely by the governor and the previous state surgeon general. And so when I see the same person running to represent Florida, I think, you know, I wouldn't want to vote for that person because I've seen the history, and I don't think this person represents the best for Florida.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's good and good personal from your field and your profession. Anyone else care to share?
Sierra, man, what's going on? Trying to clock out on us. Can't be doing homework during this thing.
Yeah. No, classes are canceled till Monday.
Okay, listen. Well then give us something now.
But yeah, so I don't know. This being so so my personal so let's go back. Obviously 2008, 2012, I obviously was not of age to vote in any elections, obviously. And so my first opportunity to vote was in 2016. And I think I was like a sophomore in college. I don't know. I can't remember. But and you know, I remember a lot of people like in my age group, like we were all just like, okay, we're finally able to vote. And these two people are who we have as our options, like Hillary, him. Like, no, this is horrible. And so I think now, especially for the millennials or the early 20s, early 20s age group in Florida, we're particularly excited, and especially here in Tallahassee, because y'all know Andrew Gillum is the mayor of Tallahassee right now, and especially here, we're just super excited to be able to be a part of history in the making. Just the simple fact that this candidate, who was the least likely to even make it on the ballot, the simple fact that this man was the poorest of them all, the simple fact that he raised less money than them all, the simple fact that he was just able to just get all the support and become the candidate for the Democratic Party of Florida, just that simple fact in itself is just like amazing, like mind-blowing to us. And so literally I don't really know how it's looking like in other counties in Florida, but particularly I know here in Leon County, in Tallahassee, literally everybody, like it's unheard of for you to not be registered to vote here. It's unheard of for you to not be rallying and trying to organize people and trying to get people registered and just being involved in the conversation of, listen, the time is now. We are the future of this state. We're the ones who we're the people who's able to make change here. And so we're just all excited. We're super excited to elect this man. Y'all, our president, our governor is about to be a Black man, a graduate of Florida A&M. It's a great time.
Yeah, very exciting.
So yeah, we're excited.
And I think to extend what the young sister was saying, I think that the national conversation has really been ahead of us, especially with Angela Rye going down to FAMU, going down to Tallahassee, and really just energizing that city. I think that in conjunction with, I think FAMU's homecoming was either recently or is coming up. So, and I know that there's been a lot of political talk, a lot of energy around Andrew Gillum and this upcoming election during those times. So, I think the whole nation is looking at Tallahassee and is looking at Florida just the same way that we are. And so I think that Black people kind of do have an understanding of what is at stake here. You know what I'm saying? And to kind of go off of Brother Ian's point, this idea of, you know, why or just or just kind of looking at why is this even significant in the first place? I know he was kind of talking about class in terms of what a lot of our people might have access to, a lot of Black people, in terms of class. And I know statistically they say like what 25% of Black people live in poverty, which means that about 75% of Black people don't live in poverty. So there's this kind of working class, middle class, and maybe a very small percentage of upper middle class that have the kind of economic benefits necessary to have a vested interest in voting. But for a lot of us, including myself sometimes, to be honest with you, even though I would be considered middle class, sometimes I still struggle with whether I should vote or not, to be honest, because if we're just real, the if you are not a part of a certain class economically, if you're part of a certain network, voting really doesn't make a difference for your life. I mean, let's just be real. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. We could have all this political talk all we want to, but there are a lot of our people who have been living the same way. They lived the same way under Trump. They lived the same way under Obama. They lived the same way under Bush, and they lived the same way under Clinton. You see what I'm saying? Or if you want to talk about local elections, they lived the same way under the previous governor, and then who was the governor before? Who was that? George Bush cousin, and then before George Bush cousin, Jeb, when he stole all them votes back in like 2004 or something like that, when they stole all them votes and then got him back elected. So I mean, especially Florida has just been under investigation and under the national petri dish for some time now in terms of politics. And so a lot of times when our poor and when the underclass see this, it's difficult to try to get them to come out and support a system that has historically and perpetually exploited them and has ignored them time after time again and has lied to them, us really, time after time again. And so it can be different. I don't feel bad. And I had to do a lot of research to realize I don't really feel bad when I hear my people say they don't want to vote. You know what I'm saying? It can be difficult. And so for a while, for about a year or two, I was really torn between the two until I began to realize, and I think and me and Steven talked about this, and I know we ended up doing something like this in Atlanta, ended up putting together an informed voter session. And I think that a lot of times gets missing in the dialogue, where we tell people, particularly our people, to vote without giving them the tools to empower themselves so that they know who to vote for. So I believe in voting, but if you don't know who to vote for, I'd rather you just sit down. I'd rather you just not vote at all, because you could be voting the wrong person in office. And if you vote the wrong person in office, then you probably could be doing more harm than good. So I believe that voting is important, but the next step and the even more powerful step is to know who you're voting for and why you're voting. And everybody may not have the tools or the education or the wherewithal to read through all of the platforms and understand all that political jargon or whatever. And but it is important. And it was like that in the 60s. But they had people like King or Abernathy or even Malcolm X to tell them, listen, all y'all who are focused on working, you're working class, you're working 2 jobs, taking care of your families, whatever, you ain't got to go through all that. I'm going to tell you exactly who to vote for, because I'm going to be the voice of reason. I'm going to be that liaison between my community and the government, or my community and the powers that be. And I'm going to tell you that this person ain't got our back. When you go to the polls, vote for this person, and this person. And these are the reasons why. And I think that's kind of where we can come in. I think we can be that voice. We can be that liaison. We can be that link to those people that may feel disenfranchised, even though they may not be fully politically, in a sense. Of course, I know we're talking about the trying to get our former brothers and sisters who were formerly incarcerated, trying to get them integrated back into the system. But in terms from a federal standpoint, on paper, we're not politically disenfranchised, but we feel emotionally and psychologically disenfranchised from a historical standpoint. To get them back into having not necessarily faith in the system, but faith in us who have access to that system, to then bring that power back into our communities and bring that power closer to home so that they feel that this is something that can work for them. I think that's where we come in. And so that's what I would like to see this group kind of become.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. That's a significant void that I think definitely needs to be addressed and looked at. And
just to piggyback,
go ahead, Sarah. Go ahead. We got 30 seconds left. You take 27 of them. I'll
piggyback off of what he was saying. That's why these conversations are so important to be had, because we have these platforms. Everybody uses social media, and we have these platforms. And like I said, we need to be that liaison for our communities to tell them, listen, these people have our back and people don't. And so I feel like we need to definitely be responsible and careful with how we use our platforms on social media and how we discuss these topics, like in the social climate you're in.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's it. 9:30. It's 9:30. I'm closing it so no one's upset with me after. When all said and done, right now we got to get people to register to vote. Tomorrow's the deadline for Florida. They won't even have an option to vote if they don't get registered. So anyone you can, we're pushing. Get registered to vote, and then later on we can help them understand why they need to vote and all that. But just they got to get registered tomorrow if they're gonna have an option. All right. So as much as you can, all of us. Hopefully this was inspiring for us here. Anyone else watching? We just want to call, text, whatever we can. Reach out to people that we might not be willing. Hopefully you're on the group if you're watching this. If not, join the group. We'll be trying to put out more information. To Jonathan's point of trying to help people understand as much as we can understand what the issues are that are at stake here, why it's so important for us to get out there and vote, and also things to be watching for at the ballot to see what's important. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you guys, man. We're a minute over, but I appreciate you guys, man. It's really, really enlightening and encouraging for me.
Hey, thank you. Thank you
for having us.
All right, guys. Till the next time. Peace.
Bye.
All right, bye.